Welcome to Star Expose. If you love celebrity news and real entertainment updates, you're in the right place. The hospital air was thick with this strange marriage of lemon antiseptic and stale coffee, a scent that clung to the walls, to the nurses' uniforms, to the folds of Kelly's jacket as she sat motionless at the foot of the bed. The halogen lights buzzed faintly above, washing the room in sterile white rectangles that reflected off the linoleum like tired ghosts. For hours, Kelly had stopped caring about the world beyond this room. Everything she needed to know was contained in the rhythmic beeping of machines, the soft whir of air, and the faint squeak of rubber soles. Time had stopped moving in a straight line. It had folded in on itself, like a badly written note she could no longer make sense of. She sat rigid in the plastic chair, her hands clenched together until her knuckles turned white, until the pain in her fingers matched the ache in her chest. On the bed, Mark lay as still as marble, his face swollen on one side, his body threaded with tubes and sensors that blinked and flickered in quiet defiance of what was happening. The monitors hummed like an orchestra of grief. Every number, every color on those glowing screens had become her language. The respirator whispered in its own strange rhythm, as if trying to comfort her with its steady breath. Earlier that evening, before the sedatives dulled his restlessness, Mark had tried to speak. The nurse, kind but professional, lowered the volume on the monitors to give them a little privacy. Kelly leaned forward, pressing her forehead gently to his. When his eyes opened, they glistened like frozen lakes, so bright, so alive, and yet so distant. His lips moved under the tape, shaping sounds that came out soft and fragmented. She strained to hear, her heart cracking with each syllable. And then she understood. He wanted the children. All of them. Mario, Louisa, Dwakin, Lola, and little Gianna. His voice, rough and trembling, carried a simple plea, not for comfort, not for forgiveness, but for presence, for family, for love. Kelly felt the air rush out of her lungs. For a moment, the world blurred. It was too much. The monitors, the lights, the smell of disinfectant, the sound of a life being measured in heartbeats and oxygen flow. But she steadied herself. She always did. The nurses moved quickly, quietly, with the grace of people who had seen everything and felt too much of it. Teresa, the nurse Kelly both respected and resented, placed a hand on her shoulder and said softly, "We'll make it work. Families allowed. We'll balance the risk." Kelly nodded and began to make the calls. Her voice shook only once. "Can you come? All of you." On the other end of the line, Mario didn't hesitate. "I'm on my way." And one by one, the others followed. Louisa, calm, strong, the one who always took charge. Dwakin, the joker, whose laughter was his shield against the world. Lola, soft-hearted, always praying for everyone else. And little Gianna, still wearing her choir robe when the neighbor brought her in. The next hours were a blur of motion and waiting, of small kindnesses that stitched the family together even as fear threatened to tear them apart. A neighbor picked up Gianna from practice, a friend offered a ride, someone texted to say they'd cover a shift at the coffee shop. By the time Mario arrived, the hospital room had changed. It wasn't just a room anymore. It was a battlefield, a sanctuary, a place where love had to fight against every sterile wall. He hesitated at the door, bracing himself for the sight that would change him. His eyes darted across the machines, the tubes, the stillness of his father's face, and then they met Kelly's. No words passed between them, but a lifetime did. He stepped closer, jaw tight, shoulders squared against the grief pressing down on him. Behind him came Louisa, calm, pale, steady. Her hand rested on her brother's back, a silent heartbeat of courage. "Hey, Dad," she whispered, her voice trembling only at the edges. She stared at the monitors, memorizing the flickering numbers, trying to decode them as though they were secret messages meant only for her. Moments later, the door opened again. Teresa entered, her eyes wide, her lips trembling. She made a small sound, a sob that wasn't quite formed before she threw herself into Kelly's arms. Kelly held her tight, both of them shaking, both of them trying to dam the flood of grief with nothing but skin and willpower. And then came Dwakin. He didn't move closer, didn't cry. He just stood by the door, hands buried deep in his pockets, his voice rough when he finally spoke. "Guess I can skip chaperoning the winter formal now," he muttered, the words cracking into something that wasn't quite a joke. "Not now," Mario said sharply, his voice breaking on the edge of anger and heartbreak. But even then, even in that strange, suspended silence, the family was still itself, a tangle of humor and love and imperfection, the same chaos that Mark had adored every single day of his life. When little Gianna arrived, she looked impossibly small in her blue robe. Her hair was still pinned with the sparkly clip she'd worn for the concert. As soon as she saw her father, she hid her face in Kelly's lap and whispered, "Mommy, is it true?" Kelly stroked her hair. "He's just really sick, baby. He's sleeping right now." The room filled with their voices, their backpacks, their smell of rain and youth and life. For the first time all night, the sterile geometry of the hospital felt broken. The family filled it with something human, something real. Kelly turned back to the bed. She took Mark's hand, the one without the IVs, and whispered, "They're here, Mark. All of them." He opened his eyes. For a moment, the struggle of breathing seemed to fade. His gaze traveled slowly, deliberately, from one face to the next, memorizing each of them. Mario, Louisa, Lola, Dwakin, Gianna. His fingers twitched, a tiny movement, but it was everything. Mario leaned forward, clutching his hand. "I'm here, Dad," he said softly. "We're all here." Lola, still crying, reached out to smooth the sheet by his feet. Her hands moved in a rhythmic prayer as though she could calm the chaos by touch alone. And for a few long breaths, time stopped pretending to exist. In that quiet room, the family that had laughed together on sets and at dinner tables, that had lived in the glow of cameras and the warmth of home, came together once more, not as celebrities, not as hosts, not as public figures, but simply as a husband, a wife, and 5 children clinging to the last fragments of a love that had shaped their entire world. Mark's eyes flickered with the faintest glimmer of a smile. It wasn't peace. It wasn't surrender. It was understanding. He had them all around him, the living proof that every sacrifice, every late night, every shared joke and fight and apology had meant something. And Kelly, leaning close enough to feel his breath on her cheek, whispered what they both knew. "You can rest now. We've got you." Outside, the city moved on, cars passing, lights changing, life continuing. But inside that little room, time hung suspended. The machines hummed, the monitors blinked, and love, fragile, messy, eternal, held them all together. For every person watching, every fan who had ever laughed with them through a screen, the story wasn't just about illness or fame. It was about what remains when everything else falls away. The small, impossible beauty of a family that refuses to let go. And in that quiet, bittersweet space between fear and hope, everyone watching, everyone praying, could only wish the same simple thing, that love would be enough to bring him back. That somewhere, beyond the hum of machines and the smell of antiseptic, Mark would open his eyes again and hold his children just one more time. Because love, in the end, always asks for one more moment, one more heartbeat, one more chance to say the words we never stop meaning. "I'm here. I love you. I always will." Thanks for watching Star Expose. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for the next big story.